Okay, welcome to our on-camera video workshop. We'll talk about some various scenarios in which you might need to use good presentation skills to represent yourself in an on-camera fashion. We'll do video conference exercises and discussion. We'll talk about if you are called upon to do an on-camera interview, what's some sort of presentation skills you can use to reflect you or reflect your company in a positive fashion using very simple techniques. And we'll look at a press conference scenario. We'll ask the same question: how can we use the good on-camera techniques to present ourselves in a way that reflects us in a positive, professional manner? We'll go over just a few audio-visual basics: angles, lighting, sound. We'll talk about how you might approach a video conference. We'll talk about how you might approach an on-camera interview if that's something you're called upon to do professionally. And then we've got 3 exercises that you all prepared and hopefully should be fun and a great way to practice these concepts. So we'll start with a couple of basics. Sound. First thing I want to talk about, talking into a microphone. Has anyone ever noticed that when you talk into a microphone or when you hear someone talking to a microphone, sometimes initially there's just an abrupt, annoying sound, like a loud click or a loud sort of feedback type thing? One technique I want to share with you, or 2 techniques I want to share with you to prevent that. One is softening up your start by using what I call the H technique, which means if you say a word that starts with H, you'll notice that you let out a tiny little breath, a tiny little amount of breath when you say that word. If you say how, it starts with a slight breathy sound. If you say who, if you say Harold, there's just a little breath that comes out of your mouth. And you can use that little amount of breath to prevent a hard start on a microphone. You could actually say a word that starts with H, or alternatively, you could just think a word that starts with H in your head. And if you think that, it will let just a tiny little bit of breath out of your mouth and prevent that hard start on the microphone. So for example, if I'm going to say, but Rutgers Business School seeks this, I would just think the H and say, but Rutgers Business School. I think that H in my head, and it just lets a little breath out of my mouth. Does that make sense? Maybe you can try it when you get in front of a microphone. The other technique I want to mention on a microphone is what I call the increasing volume pull technique. So I recommend starting with the microphone a little bit farther away from your mouth if you haven't done a sound check. If you have time to do a sound check and know exactly where you need to put the microphone, fine. But if it's just a situation where folks are passing around a microphone, I recommend starting with the microphone just a little bit further away than you would expect, and just increase the volume as you pull the microphone towards you. So combination of those 2 techniques. Start with an H sound, or just think an H sound, and increase volume as you pull the microphone to you, and you hear what the appropriate level of volume is. Does that technique make sense? So 2 things. Start with an H sound, or think an H sound, and 2, pull the microphone to you as you adjust your level of volume. If you are not using a free-held microphone, if you're mic'd up, you just have to adjust. If you have a microphone sort of clipped on you, you have to adjust your volume, and you have to just pay extra attention to that. You can't use the movement technique. Last thing I want to say about using a microphone is you want to make sure that your mouth, your face, your eyes are visible when you're talking to an audience. They've done studies that when your mouth is covered, people can't hear you as effectively. They can't for whatever reason. They're not given visual cues, and that visual cue doesn't help. It helps them, would have helped them absorb the sound or understand the sound. And you're just not taken as seriously if someone can't see your mouth moving, and it doesn't help you with your presentation. So make sure you're not covering up your mouth, face, or eyes with a microphone. Second thing, voice. Slow, natural, engaged speaking voice. When you're doing a video conference, this is not the time you want to try out your presenter voice or your show, show host. What is that? Game show host. That's what I'm looking for. It's not the time to practice being a game show host. Just speak slowly, speak clearly, speak naturally. And I like to use the term just speak with an engaged voice. I rarely would tell someone to speak louder. I would just say speak more in a more engaged fashion. Just think about what you're saying, think about why it's exciting to you, think about how you can engage yourself in that speech more. Starting and stopping. So if you're starting and stopping with an interview microphone or a video conference, I would start with these two mic techniques I mentioned. The H sound, or increasing volume pull technique, as you pull the microphone closer to you. Full sentence minimum. Sometimes if you make very short statements over a video conference, there can be a little feedback at the beginning of that statement, at the end of that statement. And if you just say 3 words, it's like the first word was fuzzy, the middle word was sort of understandable, and then the last word was fuzzy. So a full statement minimum is often a good rule of thumb when you're speaking in this type of meeting. And clear stop. This is not a situation where you want to ramble on, especially if you're on a video conference where it might be hard to understand exactly what's going on in the scenario. So don't ramble, make a clear, definitive stop that the people on the other end of the line can tell that you're going to talk. Okay, so a little basics on sound. Let's talk about eye contact. When you're working with a camera, there's always the question, do you make eye contact with the camera? Do you look into the camera? Or do you make eye contact with someone else? The studio audience, the audience that you're interacting with that the camera is capturing. And I would say it depends. Sometimes, if you want to connect directly with the people watching you on the camera, I would look straight into the camera. Other times, if you want to give the people watching on the camera the experience of being here, I would look at the studio audience. So in either case, you're conscious of the camera. You're conscious that the camera is either giving you the medium to communicate directly with the people by looking straight into the camera and talking to them, or you're conscious of the fact that the camera is watching you and you're giving them the feeling of what it would be like to be here hearing you speak in person. So, eye contact with the studio audience, this is the same concept if you're giving an interview. You make eye contact with the interviewer, and you're giving the audience that is watching on camera the understanding of what it would be like to be having an intimate conversation with you. But if you want to connect with the camera audience a little bit more directly, you can look straight into the camera. One thing I would say, if you decide to look into the camera, is commit to it. I noticed this a lot when I watched the Republican presidential debates, when sometimes the candidates would look into the camera for a second, and then they would look away, and then they would look back into the camera for a second, and it became unnerving to see them look into the camera and then twist their eyes away frequently like that. So if you decide that you're going to make a plea directly to the people watching, the American people in that case, look directly into the camera and be consistent with it. Now, it can be difficult. It can be unnerving to look directly into a camera and pretend that you're talking to people. Has anyone done that before or tried to do that before? Anyone ever done any on-camera work a little bit, Jen?
Yeah, like when you do video interviews or video conference, like it's just very bizarre.
Yeah, it's like you're looking into a machine, but at the same time, you're trying to create a personable, professional appearance because that's what the people on the other end of the camera or the other end of the video conference are seeing. Technique I like is just imagine that that camera is a person. Just have to stop in your head and think a minute. All right, this is Sally in accounting I'm talking to, and she's in Cleveland. I know who she is, and I want her to understand whatever business concept I'm trying to explain. I want to answer her questions, and just think of this camera as a person. I've also heard actors use the technique, think of the camera as a pet. Think of the camera as your little dog or your little cat that you can pet, and something that makes you think of something friendly. And this camera is not really that intimidating. It's just a small camera. Imagine if this were a bigger camera and you had several people behind it working lights and doing all sorts of mechanical things. It would be hard. You just have to remind yourself, okay, there really is someone on the other end of that camera, and they care that I put a friendly face. They care that I represent myself in a way that helps them understand the business concept or whatever it is we're discussing. So I like that term. Think of the camera as a person or a pet. Okay, open to the camera, commit fully. Okay, I want to go over a couple basics on lighting. And I hope after we have this 5-10 minute discussion on lighting, you realize that there are very simple tricks you can do to make yourself look better on camera with very simple lighting instruments, say a desk lamp or a window or the way you can shade it. Lighting is ultimately not that complicated. I'm going to teach you the basic 3-point lighting system. It involves 3 sources of light. There will be a key light, which will illuminate most of your features. A key light pointed at you from one direction is going to ultimately leave some shadows. You want to be conscious of that and think if you can get a different light pointing from a different direction to illuminate some of the shadows on your face. Thirdly, if possible, you want to think about using a backlight which will differentiate you from whatever is behind you. Differentiate you from the wall, suppose. So if I'm standing here, I've got a camera at me, maybe I'm going to try to find one source of light. Maybe it's going to come from this direction. It's going to illuminate me for the most part. But as that light shines on me, this part of my face is going to look shaded. And if I just leave it like that, the people at the other end of the video conference, the people in Seattle, are always going to remember me as the guy who had the weird shaded face. Hopefully I can get beyond that by giving them some good business advice or business discussion. But if I have another light handy, I could point it at me from a different direction and illuminate that. And then lastly, so I don't just blend in with the wall, I might shine a light on the wall and it would reflect back on me a little bit. Or I could just shine a light at my back or the back of my head and see how that works. Let me show you a quick example of this in action. All right, so example, we've got a guy sitting in a chair with no light, maybe just some overhead lights. All right, and the key, let me turn the lights off real quick so you can get a better sense of this. Okay, so no light. All right, and then we've got key light. We're starting to get an idea of this subject. We bring out more of the features, but of course, there is this shadow part of his face. So the light is coming from off here, and we've got shadows on this side of his face. So we want some sort of fill light. Maybe if he has an iPhone handy, you could shine the flashlight in it. Maybe if he has some sort of desk light, he could just shine that on that side of his face. All right, now we've got some key light illuminating this side of his face, and we're filling in those shadows from the other direction. And then lastly, we put some backlight. Either we shine some light on the wall behind him, or we shine some light at his back from the wall. And we see him stand out from the wall. Does that make sense? So 5 minutes later, you all have some skills to light yourselves. Maybe you thought this was very, very complicated art, but it really isn't. All right, a couple things to be aware of. This is an extreme example of not using good backlight when the subject just blends into the background. is a really cool look if you're James Bond, but if you're Joe from accounting, you don't want to be this person, remembered as the guy who blended into the wall. So not only is this person using no this actor using no backlight, but also we'll talk in a minute about wardrobe choice. Now you want to be conscious of this blending not happening. All right, we'll talk right now about attire, wardrobe choice. So if you find yourself getting ready for an interview, especially you want to be conscious of this. Also, if you have an important Skype call with a different department, you want to think about these things as well. Feel the part, feel comfortable. I say the two things when you're choosing your wardrobe. Think about what you're representing. All right, are you representing your company that sells life insurance? So think about how you want to represent yourself that way. But at the same time, try to wear clothes that make you feel comfortable. Because we'll talk in a moment about how you want to be yourself, and you want to feel sincere, and you want to feel confident in this interview. So wear clothes that allow you to feel comfortable, but also represent who you need to represent. Color contrast, a couple of notes. Solid colors, not dizzy patterns. Like this shirt I have on would probably be a little dizzy for the camera. In fact, maybe we can test it later. If the camera is right on me and I'm moving back and forth, it would probably make my audience dizzy. I know sometimes your favorite shirt, it has the stripes on, it fits the right way, you think, man, this is just going to really make me feel confident when I give that interview or do the video conference. But think about a shirt or wardrobe choice with solid colors that won't distract your audience. A couple examples of dizzy in pattern. Patterns dancing. Dizzy pattern. Got it. Okay. There's one. All right, here's another one. We've got flannels, vertical stripes. As this guy turns around, it distracts our eye a little bit. I mean, maybe you'd like to see that guy in your kitchen, I don't know, but the dizziness, the distraction visually is a problem. Okay, so we've gone over some basics. We've gone over eye contact, we've gone over angles, we've gone over lighting. No, we haven't gone over angles. We've gone over lighting, so now we're going to go over angles. What I mean by angles is how we want the camera in relationship to us. Like if you look at that camera that's recording this class right now, it's almost at eye level. And that's typically where we'll want it. We'll want the camera pointing at our eye level. We don't want it high looking down on us, and we don't want it low looking up on us, or giving the impression as if we're higher than the camera, higher than the audience. Vertical, right? We typically want a 90-degree angle. There's some problems when we don't have a 90-degree angle. One I call a heavy top, the other I call a mischievous bottom. So a heavy top would mean a camera that is low, it's looking up at us. It gives the kind of almighty type of picture of us. Gives an impression to our audience that we're somehow presenting ourselves in a way that's superior, perhaps. It also might be a very intimidating look. It also, when the camera is lower than you, it looks up your nose and just kind of freaks the audience out that way. The other problem is if the camera is too high and it's looking down on you, the way it hits your eyes, you can't see the whole features in your face, and you can't see the whole whites of your eyes, just makes you look mischievous, I think. I'll show a couple examples and see if you agree. It makes you look like you're hiding something. Potentially, it can make you look like you're a person who's not important because it gives a feeling of submission when the camera is pointed down at you. Big foreground. What I mean by this, the space, the camera's here, I'm here. The space behind me is called the background. The space between me and the camera is called the foreground. And if I were to go up to the camera and move my hand like this, does anyone know what would happen?
It would blur.
Well, it would blur, but it would be like this huge hand coming right at the audience. This could be a problem if the camera is close to me. Maybe I'm here talking with another colleague and we're doing a Skype exercise of some sort, and I reach for something across the table, the people in Cleveland are like, oh my God, that big hand coming at us. And I'll show an example of this. All right, so it's almost like you're assaulting the camera when you're reaching close to it in the foreground. Blended participants, we want to think about how the camera blends everyone together if they're not separate visually. I'll show an example of that. All right, so let's look at some angle examples, and let's think about, do we like the angles and how do they represent the people in these pictures, and what might be going on in terms of a mistake if there's something distracting about it. All right, so what's going on here? Picture taken by someone who probably didn't like Rick Santorum. Yeah.
It's a mix of assaulting the camera, doing the reach out foreground, and it's also positioned kind of facing up at him, so it makes it look like we're a little bit below.
Exactly. We've got the heavy top scenario. So we're looking up his nose. We're also looking at him like he's positioned himself in some sort of superior position. So it's a little bit intimidating and off-putting that way. And of course, he's just trying to shake hands with someone while the photographer just happens to be in the wrong place or the right place to make it look like he has a huge hand. Big foreground, heavy top. All right, how about this one? Look at just this part. We can talk about the poster in a minute, but just look at this part.
He's not positioned right. It looks like he's almost like over that, which is hard to hear in the background. It's just terrible.
Okay. So the angle is a little awkward, but there's something specific with the angle. It's one of those two. It's either low or high. And tell me which one it is, Al, and tell me what sort of effect it has on you as you look at this guy.
So yeah, so it's the angle of being low and up. It's also crooked. But yeah, so the effect is that he seems in a superior position.
Yes, exactly. Seems in a superior position. He's even got the lectern right in front of them. He's even got he's even dressed up, and he's got a huge picture of himself, like he thinks extremely highly of himself. Does anyone recognize this movie? This is a famous movie about a media tycoon who thought extremely highly of himself. So this was definitely a planned shot, the way the movie director did it, but it gives that impression that this person thinks he owns the world. And that's what the movie was about, but it's also good for us. We don't want to be the person who looks like we own the world when we're doing our video conferences. How about this one? You like this one? Maybe turn the lights out for this one just a little bit. What's going on here? Look like they're up to no good. Yeah, what do you do if you see these two guys in your house? You either call 911 or don't worry about it because it's already too late. So, all right, how did the person who took this picture create, at least in part, the illusion that they're up to no good and these are dangerous individuals? Because they're dressed in the same suits, in the same hairstyle, but what did they do with the camera angle?
From the top.
Michelle?
It's from the top.
Yeah, it's from the top. We're looking down. We're not able to see their full eyes. So it looks a little weird. It looks like there's something shady going on there. And how about this one? Mike?
She looks terrified. We're looking down.
All right. She looks terrified. We're looking down. So that's a good point. So she looks terrified. Do you think she looks more terrified just because of the angle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you take a breath and look closely, she's probably not terrified. She's in fact just posing as an example of a high shot. So she looks terrified. In my mind, she looks submissive. She looks like the person you hire for maybe an admin role. She doesn't look like the person you might hire for director of operations, director of marketing, simply because of the camera angle. All right. And last one. We've got some angles. We've got some blended participants in this one. This is the reason I wanted to show you this. So here are 6 folks who perhaps are doing a video conference. So we've got, I don't know, Joe, the intern, off in the corner, who obviously isn't important and no one really listens to. This woman, Sally, I don't know, from accounting. For one reason or another, she's in between these two, which makes her look less important. We've got this guy standing up tall, and we've got this woman in the foreground. Both, I think, are interesting from the standpoint of, I wonder why. I wonder why is this guy standing up, and why is this woman so clear in the foreground? Are they the leaders of the team? Do they think they're the leaders of this team? Does this team have a leader? Do we know what's going on with these folks? So maybe I'm judging this team a little bit harshly just based on the picture, but that's the impression I get. Any thoughts or additional comments on that? Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, the gentleman in the back standing up, most of the time, teacher, student, teacher standing, and he's looking down at us, so we're kind of inferior, so that impression comes across.
Good point, good point. And especially because he's got the rest of the team sitting down, it's like, all right, here's the heavy top there. Good point. Okay, so we've gone over some basics, angles, sound. What else did we do? Angles, sound, lights. All right, so some basics that apply to all on-camera type of exercises. We're going to look now at some best practices on video conferencing, on-camera interviews, and press conferences. So, video conferencing. The first thing I want to address is eye contact. So, this happens most frequently in the video conferencing type of arena as far as we're concerned. So if you're on a video conference with someone and you're looking at them, say on your laptop or a company computer, and they're looking at you through a camera that's staring at you, what happens if you're looking at them is they look at a video of you looking at a screen. And you think you're making eye contact with them, but you're looking off in a different direction as far as they're concerned. So you're having a conversation with someone and both of you are looking off in different directions. Does anyone have any ideas how we could solve this problem?
So I know how we have our conference room set up is we'll have usually a table, and then the displays will be level with the table, and they actually put the camera right between both displays. So in order to see the participants, you have to look at the display, but you're also unconsciously looking directly at the camera and talking.
Okay, so it would be great if all setups looked like that, if all setups were like that, so that you're looking very close to the lens of the camera at the same time you're looking at the participants. Al.
So I think when you're speaking, you look directly into the camera, and then when it's the other person's turn to speak, you can look at them looking into the camera, so as you're listening, you get the eye contact perception.
Okay, I would definitely recommend that. To the extent that you can, when you're speaking, look directly into the camera. And it's hard, because the camera, is that really a person? Does that person have feelings? Am I going to lose my train of thought when I'm looking into this black lens? Well, I would try it. I would try to do it as much as you can. Tonight we'll have some examples where, I guess we won't videotape the Skype calls, but hopefully you could have an opportunity at some point in your career to watch yourself on video, watch yourself on Skype, and think about the difference. Do you take yourself more seriously when you see yourself looking directly into the camera? And of course, you'll see other people so much more of the time. How seriously do you take someone when they're not making direct eye contact with you, compared to people on a video conference who have the skill to look directly into the camera and make you feel like they are talking directly to you, even though there's all this distance and there's this technological way that you're communicating. So I would recommend trying to look straight into the camera.
I was going to recommend too for more like one-on-one conferencing, like a Skype call or interview. Don't have anything distracting or anything that you can read. I've noticed a lot of interviewers sometimes, or people who are being interviewed, they'll have maybe their questions in front of them, and you can just see their eyes panning down the screen, and you know that they're, even though you're speaking at them,
Okay.
it just seems like they're distracted.
Yeah, and I've noticed newscasters do that on occasion as well. I mean, good newscasters who are talented don't let you see that, but some newscasters, you can actually see them reading the teleprompter as they're delivering the news to you. And you're like, wait. My first thought when I noticed someone doing that is like, why can't I just read it myself? Why do I need you to read it to me? Question, Dan, or
Yeah,
comment?
we see that a lot when we get emails from executive leadership. You can just constantly see their eyes rolling back and forth. And I'm just sitting there looking at their eyes and not really paying attention to even what they're saying.
Yeah.
It's that distracting. But
Yeah.
I notice like people who do well are, blinking, always turning their head so that you can never really lock in to see if they're reading,
Yes.
even though they are.
Yeah, it would be the same thing. Someone gets up to give a presentation or give a speech to you, and then they just read something word to word for you. What is important then becomes this thing that they're reading. So why don't they just give you that sheet of paper and you can read it? Why do you need to listen to them? So at least think about absorbing it. Think about how you want to portray this to the audience who you are staring at right in this moment. And it's the same thing is true with the video conference. Even though you might be reading something, you want to think about how you care about the audience who is on the other end of that video conference and how it relates to them. Another option you can use, besides staring directly into the camera, is a distance plus zoom option. What I mean by that is, suppose this is my Skype camera, all right, and suppose Vishali is the monitor. Okay, so I see Vishali here, and I can talk to Vishali here. So if I'm this close, there's a big difference between Vishali and the camera. One thing I can do is I can get further away, and I can zoom the camera closer to me. So now there's a smaller angle between me and Vishali, or between the camera and Vishali. So when I have to look back and forth between them, it's not as big of a shift in my eyes. Does that make sense? Distance plus zoom option is a good technique. Hopefully you'll have a setup like Nick has, where the monitor and the camera are close together, and to the extent you can, look directly into the camera. And imagine that camera as an actual person. All right, video conference, understated body language. What I mean by that is often a video conference will cover a wide shot. So various facial expressions I make, various movements will not be as noticeable to the people on the other end of the camera as to the people who are in the room with me. And I've seen this a couple of times where everyone in the room who's on this video conference, they just all kind of look at each other like, no one really likes this idea, right? Yeah. And you can just see the nonverbal, no one really likes this idea. But it's not as apparent to the people on the other end of the video conference because of the understated body language. So for that reason, it's important to realize that and realize you need to communicate verbally or communicate clearly with whatever your feelings are if you don't like this project or whatever the case may be. Time delays. Sometimes there can be a 1 second, 2 second time delay. This is another good reason to use a full sentence minimum when you talk, instead of just blurting out one word that will come as the people in the other location have already moved on to the next conference or the next topic. That happened to me one time. I was in Tampa, the other folks were in New York, And the folks in the first woman leading the conference in New York said, all right, is everyone okay with that? Everyone agree with that proposal? And then I like hit the off mute button and I said yes. And then I hit the mute button to put it back on. And then a couple seconds later, I hear everyone laughing. And I realized, or people told me what happened is like there was just this delay. She had moved on to the next point. Everybody said yes. And then we hear this yes. This yes just sort of coming through on the video. So, conscious of the time delays, use the full sentence minimum. Visual aids. So if you're trying to explain a graph, explain a map, right, explain something that your audience needs to understand, there's just additional obstacles. And we've got an exercise later today where we'll think about how you can bring a complicated visual something or another, visual aid, to life and not confuse your audience. But for now, I'll just say you need to be very careful about how you present that. Sometimes there's an option where you can actually click over to a graph and say, I'd like to draw your attention to this part of the graph, that part of the graph. Maybe you can move the mouse. Sometimes you can't, and I've seen people are tempted, because they can't, they're tempted to like hold up the graph and say here, this point here, that point here, and that often doesn't really work well. It's very important, I think, to just talk through the graph and say, I direct your attention to this point X, whatever, and just be very methodical about how you do that. Monotony and isolation. So, as folks in Cleveland are watching you on this video conference, as 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by, if it's just one person talking and then another person talking and then another person talking and the whole time you haven't reached out or connected with Cleveland, Cleveland might be falling asleep. I'm sure you all have experienced this. And this is an important project. If you're communicating important information, you want to try to break that up just for that reason. In addition to the fact that you want people to like coming to your meetings, or you want people to be enthusiastic about this project. So use opportunities to connect with the people on the other end. Say, you all in Cleveland, do you have any questions on that? All right, Sally, do you have questions on that? Joe, pick out individual people and say, can I get your feedback from you, just to build that connection with people in different locations. Another thing you can do is change the camera angles from your location. So instead of just one shot of 5 people the whole time, and the 5 people just take turns talking, you could focus the camera on the speaker at one point, and then maybe pan the camera across to someone else, or zoom the camera out so you see a wider group of folks. And just that change can wake up the people at the other end of the conference to avoid that isolation, avoid people falling asleep and not hearing what you want them to hear. And for the same reason that visual aids can be confusing, people can feel isolated and fall asleep, and time delays, sometimes we can misinterpret signals. I recommend you be very clear with what you're trying to communicate in any type of video conference scenario. Use simple techniques like an agenda, like an overview system, preview. All right, here are the 5 things that we're going to talk about. Check in every now and then with a 30,000-foot view. So I realize we're in the details of this technical thing, but let's just take a step back and say this is the big picture of what we're talking about. This is the 30,000-foot view. When you get done talking about things, maybe you're going to do a quick review. So I realize those of you in Miami may have gotten a little lost, but let's just review. We talked about this and we decided this. These are, of course, great techniques you can use for any meeting, but sometimes they're much more important when you have this distance on a video conference. You add technical difficulties to the mix, and these type of simple concepts become even more important. All right, so that's video conferencing. Any comments on video conferencing? War stories on video conferencing? Anyone wants to share before we move on? Dan?
A lot of times with teleconferencing, the delays become that much more amplified, especially when we're coming to introduce whoever's on the call, for example.
Okay.
By the time you say hi or your name, you hear somebody, and then they hear you, and then everyone just stops.
Oh, okay, so, okay, got it. So everyone hears, it takes everyone a minute to hear you,
Yeah, so
to
like,
slow down?
if there's a conference call here and you and I.
Oh,
are
so
on
no
the
one
road,
talks, I know what you're saying.
You know, I'm introducing myself, and at the same time you're introducing yourself, we're both on the call on the road, and then once you start, I
Okay.
stop because I felt
Okay,
something else.
so there's like this 1-2 seconds of
Yeah.
multiple people talking and then everyone stops.
Yeah.
And then, okay, okay,
I don't know
so,
if there's any way about that, but.
well, maybe an agenda or someone facilitating that, I think is the best way to handle that. Another way, if no one is taking charge and facilitating that, is just a clear start, full sentence minimum, don't stop. Be the one who keeps talking. And unless you get feedback that that's not working, or someone you feel like you come across as too aggressive, then you can correct that obviously, but just state your full sentence minimum and make a clear stop. Don't ramble on. Make people wonder whether you're stopping, make a clear stop. Yeah.
I'm going to mention one thing, also, kind of around the body language. A lot of people I know when they go or when they have a video conference, they almost treat it as a conference call, and where they forget at some point that people can see them, and they start feeling comfortable that it's them in the room.
Playing with their
and they
phone.
yeah. So it's, I've had people do that, or people in my group do that. You always want to make sure everyone's present.
Good. Good, great reminder. And I also might recommend changing camera angles in that type of situation. So when it's Bob's turn to talk, put the camera right on Bob. When it's, when you're transferring to someone else in a different location, they're talking, pan the camera out so you see now this is listening time. Yeah, great points. All right, so let's move on to on-camera interviews and some best practices to do that. Ways to represent yourself positively if you're called upon to explain something about your company, explain a new product launch. Maybe you're dealing with a difficult situation. Explain how you've come through a difficult time or dealt with some sort of scandal. How can you positively represent yourself in that meeting? The first thing I want to mention is what I call the two-way, one-way conversation. This is something you'll encounter in an interview where essentially you, as an interviewee, you're having a two-way conversation with an interviewer. So the interviewer is asking you questions and you're having a two-way conversation. Just a normal conversation that we all have all the time. But the difference is, you're also having just a one-way conversation with the camera. The people watching at home are not seeing the second part of that conversation. You're just having a one-way conversation with them. So you need to be clear about what you're saying in that one-way conversation. And one way this plays out, as often interviewers will try to rile you up, try to ask you a difficult question, try to get some sort of reaction out of you. And if you react to that, then the audience at home, they don't see that the interviewer tried to rile you up. They just see you getting agitated. Because it's just a one-way conversation between you and the camera, or the audience watching via the camera. So you can use this to your advantage as well. If the interviewer asks you a difficult, threatening question, you can just act like they asked you a friendly question. Your friendly body language, your pleasant tone in responding to it, the one-way conversation with the camera, that's all that is seen. Is your positive reaction. Does that make sense? Noticed that Hillary Clinton does this especially well. She's often asked difficult questions like, how do you deal with the fact that no one trusts you? How do you deal with the fact that all young people hate you? How do you deal with the fact that you might be in prison for this email thing? And I've seen her answer those questions with a smile on her face and just a positive, open body language. So she's gotten a lot of practice at answering those types of questions and being friendly in response. Now, Donald Trump, on the other hand, is a different story. He reacts. Like if you ask him a nasty question, he'll give the interviewer a nasty answer back. But that's a whole other story about how that's working for him and why. So, unless you're Donald Trump, I would say you want to respond positively to any type of hostile question because that's all the camera will see. All right, one-way, two-way conversation. Posture, sit up straight. What happens is the camera cannot see depth. So if I'm hunched, the camera really can't see that, you know, my back is curved a little bit. It can't really read that I'm hunched over and slouched over. All it can see is that I'm squished down because it doesn't see the depth. And it looks even more like I have slouching posture if I don't sit up straight. So just sit up straight. Heard it 1,000 times, especially when you're on camera. Upright and forward, lack of depth perception that the camera doesn't see. Okay, overstated body language. Now I mentioned a minute ago with the video conference that there's understated body language. And I mentioned that because there's a wide shot. Typically the camera encompasses a large area, and shot encompasses a large area. So the audience watching this on camera cannot see the nuances, facial expressions, the same way people in person can. But now, for an on-camera interview, I'm saying there's overstated body language. Does anyone know why? That's it. All right, the camera is typically closer on you. And especially if it's a situation where your reaction is important, people conducting the interview will get a close-up right on your face. So the audience can read that. The audience can read when you're upset. The audience can read if you're not being sincere. The audience sees you in a close-up moment. I mean, think about the times in your life when you have close-up conversations. Right? When you're so close to someone that they see you in the same way they would see you on an intimate interview. Right? They're 2 feet away from your face, or 1 foot away from your face. That's a pretty intimate space, right? And that's what an on-camera interview can create, that closeness with you. So people at home watching will see your reactions. And I like to say, be sincere at all times in your communications. But this is also a reminder that you want to think about what you can sincerely communicate, what you can be excited about communicating. You don't want to put yourself in the position where you're just saying the company line as if you're a robot that you don't really believe, because the camera can read that in a close-up shot. Actors call it truth times 10. Camera sees truth times 10. Close-up moments. Right? Think about how you have close-up moments with people in your real life. That's what you're seeing when you're watching someone on an interview. In terms of the camera angle, we talked about the vertical. You know, if this camera is going to be used to interview me, we want the camera at 90 degrees. We want the horizontal. I want the camera as close to dead on from the horizontal as possible. I don't want, if the camera's here, I don't want to be facing the interviewer here and just have a side profile of me. I want to be as close to looking directly into the camera as possible. So hopefully, if, say, Vishali is my interviewer, all right, this would be a good angle. I would be open to the camera, and it would see my full eyes, it would see my full face. I wouldn't see a side profile that makes me look shady. If, suppose, Mike is interviewing me, I'm getting a little bit of a side profile. If I have some control over that, I might say, hey, can we switch the camera? Or have my agent or have my PR person say, can we switch the camera? There's another thing I can do, which is a bit of an advanced technique. If Mike's interviewing me here, the camera's here, I can answer his questions and talk to him as if he is here. Like I can talk to Mike, just talk to an imaginary chair right there. The audience is not going to know, but they're going to see more of my face. It's an advanced technique that you want to practice beforehand, but it's possible. It's certainly usable. Does that make sense? Daniel?
If it doesn't matter to you that you're not making eye contact directly with Mike, why wouldn't you just look straight in the camera?
Okay, so remember that we make a choice. Do we want to look straight into the camera, or do we want to look make eye contact with the person that we're in the studio audience with. In an interview situation, we want to give the at-home audience the feeling of that intimate conversation we're having with the interviewer. So we want to create that for the audience. And we want to show our sincere selves. We want to be talking to someone as if we're having a friendly, intimate conversation. And we want the audience to have that impression. And I can create that. I'm glad you asked that, Daniel. I can create that. I don't have to be looking at Mike to create that. I can still give the audience that impression of what it would be like to be having a sincere, intimate conversation with me just by looking at an empty chair. Does that make sense?
This is when Mike is here in person interviewing you, and there's a camera there, and you're just not looking at him.
Right, right. All right, so Mike is here, the camera's here, I'm staring right here, and I'm giving the audience the impression of what it would be like to have an intimate conversation with me. So I'm so glad you brought that up. That's a weird concept, isn't it? It's similar to being on a Skype call with someone and trying to create that feeling of intimacy by looking directly into the camera. You're creating an illusion that you're looking into their eyes, but you're not actually looking into their eyes. But you're representing yourself in a way that's going to make them take you more seriously, maybe make them think you are a more talented professional than you are just because you know a few basic techniques. Or maybe you're going to let them know how talented you are because you know how important those details are. We're creating an illusion to an extent. Does that make sense, Renee? All right, good. Glad you brought that up. Okay, so let's think about what we want to say in on-camera interviews. We don't want to just respond to whatever questions we are asked. I used to think this when I was a kid, when I was watching those late night shows with David Letterman and Jay Leno. I used to think like, oh, he brings these people on the show and he just asks them questions. I wonder if I got on the show, I would just depend on what Jay Leno asked me, and I would just hope I had the right story based on his question. But that's not the way it works. When you come on for an interview, when you prepare for an interview, you have something that you want to say. You have your key messages, and oftentimes it doesn't matter what the interviewer asks you. You're going to say your key messages. You don't want to be at the whim of whatever someone asks you to determine how you represent your company. You've got your key things that you want to say, and you want to think about how those can be condensed down to meaningful sound bites. And then the next step is to think about what questions you're actually going to be asked. And think about how you can answer those with your key messages and your sound bites. Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State, famously once said, "Does anyone here have any questions for my answers?" So when he was answering questions from the White House press corps, didn't matter what they asked him, he would always say whatever he wanted to say. And he actually came right out and said it one time. Does anyone here have questions for my answers? And that is, of course, the way you want to approach the interview. You don't want your answers to depend on what someone just happens to ask you. You have a purpose for communicating. Think about that. Okay. Let's talk about a way to handle positive questions, and let's talk about a way to handle negative questions. If someone asks you a positive question, you can reiterate that question. Why not? All right, someone asks you, tell us how you've marketed this product so effectively. All right, so your question is why we've done such an excellent job of marketing this product. I would love to tell you that. Here's my key message, here's my sound bite. Alternatively, if someone asks you a negative question, you might not want to repeat that back, first of all. Similarly, you might want to try to steer that to a different direction and use what is called a blocking and bridging technique. Blocking, essentially, we're going to stop the momentum of the negative question and bridge that to something that we want to talk about. So if the company asks us, or the reporter asks us, well, give me a difficult question. Somebody give me a difficult question. See if, why? Oh, okay, so I see, I'm sorry. She asked, why should I trust you? Okay. So I hear what you're saying. You're asking some questions about how we communicate. And I would love to tell you about how our company is communicating to build trust among the American people. Now, I'm not directly answering why you shouldn't trust me. I'm certainly not reiterating the question. So you're saying you have a lack of trust in me? Right? I just want to be clear, right? So we can move forward. I'm not going to reiterate the question that way. So, reiterate positive questions, blocking and bridging for negative questions. Okay. Any questions about on-camera interviews before we move on? Or comments? War stories? Dan?
When you talk about reiterating positive questions, it just sounds a little weird to just repeat exactly the same question we asked.
Okay, so a couple of ways I would suggest you handle that. You can shade it in a different nuance. So you ask me, tell us why you've had so much success in marketing. Say, all right, so the question was about the, it's a different way I can say that. The question was about how we've positively represented our different campaigns. That's your question, right? So let me tell you about that. You could just say it a little differently to keep it fresh, but also you might want to keep in mind that sometimes it's hard for the audience to hear the question that was asked. Like I said just a minute ago, Lavanya asked me a question, you're like, what question did you say? All right. So if it was a positive question, I'm going to reiterate it clearly. If it was a negative question, I can reiterate it, essentially, but by bridging it to something that I want to talk about.
I was going to say, for me personally, I did a video interview, and I'm not used to seeing myself on camera, and it was an interview where I'm not seeing the other person, but I'm seeing myself answer the questions. So I felt like that was pretty distracting because I'm trying to answer questions, and at the same time I'm noticing things that I've never really noticed about myself or how I use body language. So I would suggest maybe getting comfortable with seeing how you look in camera before doing a video interview in case that's the situation.
Yes, it can be painful. We judge ourselves harshly, but that's a great point. You don't want the first time you're noticing weird things about how you look on camera to be in a very high stakes environment. So some practice is great. And forgive yourself when you twitch a little bit too much or whatever you're more critical of than your audience might be. Great point. Okay, so press conferences. You need to give a press conference. Suppose your company just spilled millions of gallons of oil in the Atlantic Ocean. You're going to give a press conference explaining what you're going to do about it. I suppose it's a positive situation. You just came out with a great product and you want to explain it, and you're able to generate some interest to get the press there to watch you make that announcement. I want to pose the question, why do we hold a press conference? And I want to tell you the answer I have in mind, and we'll discuss it, see if you agree. The reason you hold a press conference is because you have two things that you need to portray, or you need to show. One, you have a key message, and two, you have an important message. So if you just had a message that you wanted to portray, to get out, you could just send out a press release. You could mail it to or email it to the various news organizations. But the reason you might want to hold a press conference is you have a specific person who you want to portray that information. And that in and of itself is an important message. All right, if the CEO of the company comes to deliver this press conference, that's a signal that we're taking this issue very seriously, or we're very excited about this new development. And the characteristics of that person, their reputation, the way they've been known for the company or known, their association with the company, all plays into how their message is received. And if you are the person coordinating this press conference or deciding on this press conference, you may say, all right, well, let's say this key message that is important for our business, but let's very carefully think about who we need to present this message. So, press conference, key message is important, and in fact, the specific messenger is also something you want to think about. So, a press conference, you may read a prepared statement, and also think about, as I mentioned, characteristics of the person giving this message. Statement length. You want a short, concise press conference statement? If it's too long, the problem with the press conference that's too long is it offers too much. You're in a sense, you're at the mercy of the press, the media people who come. They can print whatever they want. They can show whatever little news clip they want. So the more concise you can make your statement, the more you can control the message. So concise, short to the point, something that's newsworthy that you think the media will rerun on the 6 o'clock news. And hopefully that's helpful to whatever cause you're trying to benefit with this press conference. Newsworthy, too long, can offer too much, can bore your audience. And like, why did we come here? All right, I got a deadline. I got to be back at 4 o'clock to get this on for the news. You're going on and on. All right, I'm just going to do a piece about how you went on and on. And of course, you want to give the media that's there something valuable, some newsworthy information. You just don't want something that's so short they feel like they've just gotten some little canned soundbite from it. All right, question and answers. So suppose you're at a press conference and you get asked a bunch of questions. I would use the same techniques we went over with the interview. If they ask you a positive question, reiterate, answer positively. It works into your key message in your soundbite. You are asked a negative question, you're still playing to the camera in this scenario where you're conducting a press conference, and you might need to remember that even though you have 5 or 6 different reporters yelling annoyed, angry-seeming questions at you, the camera just reads your reaction. So if you respond to that with positive body language, that one-way conversation can be represented just by your positive reaction. So questions, I would use interview techniques that we talked about, reiterating positive, blocking, bridging negative, and remember that it's still a one-way, two-way conversation, and do not get riled up by people who are trying to agitate you. We'll get a chance to practice that later with our press conference. Okay. Any comments or questions on press conference before we move on? Yes,
It
ma'am.
wasn't a press, I think it was after a State of the Union, they asked John Kerry what he was wearing, and his reaction was like, what? And even if you couldn't hear what the ridiculous question, the look on his face was like, who are you and why are you talking to me? It was exactly what you were saying about how he reacted to the camera.
Okay, so the interesting clip was him reacting and him getting angry. So John Kerry gets angry about something. Was this before he ran for president or after
This
he ran?
was like, maybe a couple months ago.
Okay.
There was no reason, they were asking him, who designed this, who are you wearing? Like, they never asked any politician, ma'am, what designer designed your suit? They don't ask men that. And
Okay.
I think it was after the State of the Union, they're leaving, or some political thing. And that's the question they asked. And his reaction was like, he looked extremely confused and annoyed.
Okay.
And it was really funny.
Right, and it all just reflects on him. No one's asking the reporter, why did you ask such a silly question? It's all about how John Kerry reacted to this. Good point, excellent. All right, are you ready for our exercises to practice these scenarios? All right, I'm excited. Hope you all are excited. Yes?
Now we talking about the press conference. Today I was at the Newark Federal Court. I saw the press conference. It's about the case of the Port Authority, Mr. Samson and the United Airlines case. I don't know if
Can you?
So he pleaded guilty.
Okay.
The lawyer.
His best friend.
Yes.
What's that?
This
There
his
you go.
best friend. He did guilty.
Mhm.
He had a
2 years.
bribery scandal with United
Yeah, he
Airlines.
received money from the United.
They did this.
Jail years.
Okay.
So when I was in front of the conference and all the reporters.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah, I was there.
Okay.
And I, trying to remember all the stuff that you said and the person who was interviewed. The only thing that I noticed different, they were reading a lot.
Reading a lot at the press
Yeah.
conference?
Yeah. It wasn't like more than like natural. And then the guy from the FBI also talked and they were like with the paper in front of them.
Okay, yeah, so, well, especially when there's legality involved, but pretty much any time at a press conference, it'll be a short, prepared statement.
Ah, okay.
You want to do your best. to bring your messenger characteristics to that. So you're reading it for a reason, because you're the CEO of the company, because you're the person who is trusted in the company, and you want to reflect a little bit of your personality, but at the same time, you need to be clear that there's a clear message, and especially in that type of case, you're probably going to want to say word for word so you don't get yourself into more trouble or whatever's going on with that. Good point. All right, so let's start with our live long insurance. So I've assigned a number of you roles, and we're going to break up and we're going to solve this annuity processing problem. Essentially, there's paper processing with these various annuities, and there is an electronic process where customers can invest in annuities by signing up in an online system. And I've given various people roles to discuss how we're going to merge this change in this changing environment. And naturally, there's going to be some confusion and some different opinions. So we'll watch and we'll think about how this all plays out and how and if any of these techniques we just went over contribute to or add confusion to the scenario. So let's do it this way. I've got a couple of breakout rooms. I'm thinking we'll do this. So Mike, your laptop is up and ready to go. Vishali, all right. So let's, okay, great. So Jim, you'll stay here and you'll use my laptop and we'll watch the back of Jim's head or front, we'll figure it out, and we'll watch everything on Skype here. And then I'm gonna have Mike and Vishali and Nick go off to their separate team rooms. Okay, so let's see. So Vishali, why don't you take this to room 217. So you and Nick and Vishali, you're gonna go to 217. Mike, you're gonna go to room 220. And Mike, you're gonna connect with me on Skype. I'll call you both on Skype. I'll give you like a couple of minutes. Jim, let's see. Oh yes. Oh my God, okay. So Daniel is filling in for Saeed, who has hand, foot, and mouth disease. So you're going to come sit with Jim. Sorry about that. Thank you. I would have realized that. Okay. So you two are going to share.
Hold on, we're not ready yet.
Okay, take your time. We still need to get Mike on.
Okay, all right.
Is it good?
We're zooming in. Stuff that he said don't do.
Yes,
All right, let's see.
So I dialed a mic. Hopefully it was the right mic. Yeah, there we go.
Everybody knows stuff like that.
Good idea.
Oh, yeah. I think this is the best way we're gonna get there, because you can't mount it. Yeah. So my job is gonna make a follow up. So I'll offer my opinion, but then ultimately.
Mic on. You're not getting mic.
Are we in the New York office?
No, we're in the office.
We're in the
Mike.
There we go.
Hey.
With me on the internet.
We've got Mike.
Lighting's terrible.
Yeah, so do I. So I think we're gonna do that.
Just tease.
So hopefully he's for processing.
Keep an eye.
Vishali and Nick, can you hear us now? Did we hang up on them?
Oh, yeah.
Mine says that they need to get the latest version of Skype to use group.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, but we just had the group. Maybe we can.
Maybe you could do like Google Hangout.
Okay. Maybe. Oh, you're working on it. You're just downloading it?
Yeah.
Well,
That's
Can we try and see?
Daniel, are you VP of Information Technology?
Can we try and see if you're
Okay.
we're able to call? Oh, let me see if I'm able to call you. And maybe we could-
Yes, like.
I can call you, I have it on.
Okay. Or actually, let me call you because I need to do the ad thing, I think. We got three.
Albert.
Then we keep click here, click here. Oh.
That's cool.
I can find them.
So
Yeah, would you mind?
However you want to
They're in room, I think, two 217. I'll walk you.
2017.
217?
With the last part is, yeah, last part is the resolution.
It's been a long, actually, I want this week video. It's been such a long week.
Yeah, it's not. You have the test for Monday.
Exactly. That's it. Or not.
That's a midterm for Monday.
That's a so that's that.
This one ends working too.
Yeah, I think so. Oh, there's that camera.
I can't see the video.
She's in that room.
No comment.
I guess that's what we're gonna have to do.
Well, we don't go there. And then we can practice.
There we go. That's good.
Oh, chill.
There you go.
Just
Yeah, I
like
get
that.
this. I just want
Nick, can you see us? Nick, can you hear us or see us? Okay, we can see us.
Can't hear you though.
Can you hear us, Nick? Can you hear us? No?
They said no. She should.
Okay, we're gonna need to hear you for that.
No.
Are you on mute? So the agenda of all video conferences should include like 15 minutes. It's, Marilyn, did you have audio on your Skype?
Oh, we can't.
Sure.
Yeah, they can't hear us and we can't hear them.
Can you guys hear us now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay. That doesn't change from there.
Would you like? We have juice in
Okay, so we've got colleagues from Los Angeles, India, New York.
Yep.
Say just one head at a time.
Or like, should we move it?
All right, have,
We're back.
tell Mike to kick it off on that.
All right, Mike, go ahead and kick it off. We're ready on our end from New York.
Okay. You in Mumbai, can you hear us?
Yeah, we're just adjusting the volume really quickly.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we have everybody now. Thank you all for taking the time to get together. I know it's a little tough with the time difference between LA and Mumbai.
It's a bit early here, but
Yeah.
a beautiful morning.
So first off, everybody knows the results from last year. Great job, everybody. We over $4 billion of annuities we sold. That's over 700,000 annuities processed. So again, I know you all have heard it before, but thank you for all of your hard work in doing this. So this year, we're already off to a good start, but I'm confident we'll do better than last year. So the reason we are all getting together is to talk a little bit about this online processing system that we have, and it was, it's a little new to everybody. Last year, we only, out of $4 billion, only 85 million of them were online or processed online. So we want to talk a little bit about how we can improve that. I mean, we've spent a decent amount of money investing in coming up with this system, and I'd like to get everybody together, one, to hear your thoughts, and then two, to come up with ideas about how we can make, how we can do better in 2016 as far as how many orders are actually processed online. So maybe we start with Jim and kind of get your perspective on things.
Yeah, so I just want to start this off by saying that I'm not opposed to using the online application system. I mean, I think it could be pretty good. The problem that we've been having, though, is that over the past year, it's been actually taking longer to get online applications processed than the paper forms. So you have to remember that our brokers service multiple annuity companies. So when they're working for a client, if they're having problems with ours, they might just go to somebody else. So I think we need to keep in mind that we need to make this process as easy and as streamlined for them as possible in order to preserve sales. So my fear is that if we move just to an online system, they're going to have too many problems, too many glitches, and they're going to say, we just don't want to do it. And then the other thing that we don't want to forget about is that there's a 90-day limit on these things. So we've been averaging 40-some odd days to get these applications processed. As we approach 90, we run the risk of having to have them resubmitted again. Now, I mean, if you were selling these annuity products and you knew that Liberty annuity products sometimes didn't go through in the first shot, we had to resubmit twice, would we just go somewhere else? I mean, your time is valuable as someone in sales. So I think we should allow them to continue using the paper forms until we can get the online system worked out.
Okay, all good points. Vaishali, your team has to process all of Jim's team's sales. So, what is your take on things? Okay, having a hard time hearing you. No.
Oh, they closed her. How about now?
We can hear you, Nick. We can hear you pretty well.
How about using the phone for doing it in a
Oh, she wants.
Still not hearing you.
Because she hears an echo.
She wants to call it
You
before.
got the
Oh, is that what?
She said she wants to call it before.
Okay, how about this? Can you hear me now?
Sort of.
Alright. So I think the issue, Mike, is that, our big team, and 125 people, but to keep up with the demand, it's just a lot of manual work on the next week. So I would really like to see it go to online, and I hear what Jim is saying. One option is to phase out and maybe, try to have a good fraction of what our total sales are. But perhaps we can do a much bigger role, and at least start with maybe 50% of that application shop, and then see how it goes. Because right now, the way they're doing, it is a lot of stress, putting a lot of stress on my team, and we cannot see over this.
And Mike, kind of to Shali's point, this is Nick. One of the things, we initially, the project manager, just kind of give you a quick status update, so we rolled this process out pretty smoothly. It's kind of gone off without a hitch. Kind of earlier to Jim's point, I think everybody is aligned that ultimately this application is going to allow us to drive efficiencies in the long run, increase our processing times, reduce overall costs. I know that one of the things that's kind of plaguing our full deployment of the process is I feel that some of the departments or divisions, there's definitely a level of comfort with the paper application, and there's a bit of reluctancy to fully adopt or to embrace the new system.
So I think we really just have to align on where the system falls within our organization and to really drive home the message with sales so they can use it more often. Right now, because of that overall reluctancy to adopt this new application and to shift the 4 billion processes to the online, it's definitely led to a significant decrease in the overall investment of the IT infrastructure, which is causing those 47-day processing period, which is only about 6 days more on average than our paper processing currently. So I think if we could really kind of change the mindset, if we're all aligned on really bringing this online process to life, we have to definitely incorporate, instill the key drivers of why we're doing this within the organization. We need to invest heavily within the IT development in order to be able to drive home and create that process so it's streamlined so we can get down to a 25-day turnover time. So we can streamline processing time by over 44%. And overall, no implementation is going to be, it's a process, it's going to take time. We're not going to be able to do this overnight. But I think we're headed absolutely in the right direction. And I think we just need to make sure that we're ready to fully adopt and turn over this new process so we can be competitive and keep up with the changes in the market.
Okay, thank you. And Daniel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I mean, points that Nick made and Charlie made, and then what Jim mentioned about going back to paper. I mean, our guys here in IT, greatly understand and value the potential benefit of building that online processing system, but I don't really feel that we can justify additional IT expenses unless the online system gains greater use at this point. A lot of the budget is already tied up in supporting our 120 some odd supporting staff. Not really, little hesitant at allocating more funds unless the staff is decreased would be appropriate at this point at least. We could support with the 10 million the online processing task, but I mean that would come at the cost of the support staff, like I mentioned. And at this point, unless we could pull in at least $1 billion, through the online channel, don't really feel that at this point it would be appropriate for the online system.
Okay, well, we had made a commitment to the board a few years ago when we started this that we were going to head in this direction. And Jim, you certainly had valid concerns, but you also said you were not opposed to it. So I assume you're willing to work together here with us to find a solution. So I want to try to find some way we can come up, and everybody seems to, have thoughts on this, that how can we get our online processing up? And yes, it might be painful, but we want to try to make it as painless as possible for Jim's team to do so.
So Mike, just to interject really quickly, so absolutely agree. Our team in Mumbai here is about 125 people. 90%, we're forecasting about 90% of those employees, once this system is up and running, the order processing department doesn't need to be that big. Now, I'm not saying that we should let go of people or bring down division, absolutely not. What I am saying is that our employees can very easily be retrained to develop and move from manual order processing management to a very, they can be retrained for people who are willing to make that jump to join the IT support staff and help build that infrastructure. So we can definitely, we don't have to get rid of any pieces. We don't have to really even bring in any additional budget. As long as we're heading on the path that we are now, we can just simply reallocate some of those sources, to help drive home the overall implementation. But we definitely have a large staff here, and a lot of them right now are very familiar with the order processing process. We can get them properly trained and coordinated to help develop the IT initiative. Absolutely, I think we can continue to do
I totally agree. And so 2 questions that come to mind are, one to Jim is, what can everyone here do to help support your team to make this a little more painless? And then 2 would be to Nick and Vishali, how would we go, how do you suggest we go about training some of the folks in Mumbai to maybe help with the implementation and support any questions that Jim's staff comes up with along the way? So maybe Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think one of the key factors here for us is going to be, as a group, deciding what message I can take back to my sales staff. So it's very difficult for me to try and get them to use a slower system. But I can say, look, if you continue to use this system, they're going to continue to put resources on training more employees, and it's going to continue to improve. So what I think we need to agree upon here is an initial first step of how many people we're going to retrain as an effort to improve the online order processing step. I'll go back to my sales team and I'll tell them that starting on whatever date we decide, we're going to train more people to get the online ordering down. If they see there's some success there, and I can present them a story that says, look, previously it was taking 47 days, now we're down to 44, so we're going to train another round of people to try and get it down to 40, we're going to start building that necessary momentum on our sales staff, and they're going to really see the value of it. But until then, it's very difficult for me to go back and try and get them to use a system that risks their personal commissions on these sales.
Okay, Vishali, do you have any comments on how we can allocate some of your team?
Yeah, so what we could do right now is, you know, like, we are really stressed with resources.
We're losing your volume.
One of the things that we could do is start with 25% of the staff, train them, but at the same time, they don't have to be trained outside of their normal working hours for now, because they are fully 100% vested on working on doing the paper application. Once they are trained, you know, we need to see from Jim's team the increase, a certain increase. Maybe, you know, we have to come up with, say, 10% increase in online over, you know, over a quarter or something. We have to come up with those numbers. And so it has to be a phased approach. So as the online applications go up, then we can start training our staff and bringing them out of the paper processing into the online processing.
So I think that we can do that. I have a few people on my sales staff that are very heavily weighted with their online applications. They have influence over some people in their offices and in their regions. So what I'll try and do is reach out to them and see who else they can convince to start using that online system a little bit more. That's going to be the low-hanging fruit for us. And as we start to build these little successes and get this momentum going, I'll start working on some of the holdouts, and I will make sure that we drive up the online applications.
And again, I think here, just to touch on Michelle and Jim's point, adoption is key. You know, we're a fast-moving company. We're in a very competitive market. Our competitors are using the same exact application right now, and smoothly. You know, while we definitely have that comfort level in the paper application, in order to really make this a successful initiative, the adoption's got to be there. And I think it's all, Mike, that, you know, to our point, I think it's got to come, you know, especially from the top down. Make sure that we have leadership's commitment to driving this initiative. You know, to make sure it goes through management all the way down to the order processing team.
And just to add to him, what you're saying is, Jimmy, you can actually offer to your team that as we roll this out, the processing time will go down to 22 days. And that will actually help your team sell our product to bankers. So I think that's an incentive for your sales team. Yeah.
Okay, and to Nick's point, I can guarantee you've got the support from the top down. I appreciate the fact that everybody is coming together on this and everybody seems in agreement, so it will definitely be a lot of work, but I think it'll definitely pay off in the end. So, I don't know if anyone has anything else to add.
Line here, we can get you a proposal, Mike. I worked with Michelle, I can get you on a proposal regarding, you know, potentially converting staff and what that scenario looks like to get some additional uplift from the IT department.
Yeah, we can definitely support that. So Nick, thanks for bringing that up. We can bring out, since the majority of our IT folks are based here in New York, we can bring out teams to invite to begin that onboarding process, at least from the software standpoint, so that when we do roll out the whole training plan, you know, they're hitting the ground running.
Okay. That would be great, and maybe you guys can think about that, work on how you can, your thoughts on the training plan. Jim, you said you're going to go back to some of your people and come up with maybe a few more target sales reps to really push this. So maybe we take a week and reconvene, and I'd like to stay involved because this is a very important initiative, and like I said, everybody's on board. It's important that everybody's on board. So I think in the long run, it will make sales job easier once everyone's trained. It will certainly make Vishali's team, it will transform your team a bit, but to Nick's point, we're not looking to eliminate positions. We're looking to stay up to date with the technology of today, streamline, and maybe we can handle $8 billion of annuities with the same amount of people. So in closing, if anybody who buy, anything else to add?
I think we're good here.
Okay, New York?
I think we're okay. Yeah, we're looking forward to kicking it off.
Okay, sounds good, everybody. I'll be in touch in a week to 10 days, and we'll go from there.
Don't hang up just
Yeah,
yet.
yeah, don't hang up just yet.
Yeah, command shift. One.
Yeah.
Take it. Does it pop up? That's not-
It's fine, I think we got it. All right, we're good. All right, tell everybody to come back and bring Maryland's,
Come back to New York, come back.
Bye.
Take a flight back.
all right, excellent. Come back to New York. All right, okay, good work. Yeah, just have a seat, relax for a minute. We'll wait for the rest of the team to get back, and we'll just do a quick debrief. Hopefully I got that screenshot,
Good
because
job. Usually I'm taking a screenshot the whole
oh,
screen
Command
is
Shift
blank.
3, my bad.
I think 4 is the selection.
4 is the selection. Oh, wow. Well, you all can remember. Yeah, mentally think about what you saw. I wanted to do a quick screenshot to show you some of the lighting. All right, our leader tonight. Great job. Oh, thank you. All right, thanks for coming back to New York. Appreciate it. So let's start with some comments from you. What did you notice about that scenario? And what, in terms of what we discussed in class, helped or hurt the effectiveness of that? Lavanya?
No, I think at one point, like this conversation, I thought they were really owning that company, and I kind of started to think that this was more serious than just a
Assignment.
Like,
an assignment.
oh,
Like,
okay.
they're really-
You took them seriously, yeah, thank you.
Like, they're really serious about this.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. All right, they're really serious. She thought that it was a real company that you were representing for a minute. Yeah, thank you all for taking that assignment seriously. I've used this example for a couple of classes now, and I thought last time, and I thought a little this time, that I might want to simplify this a little bit, but it didn't seem to bother you all. You had those details down. So how were they able to effectively communicate around those complicated details video conferencing environments?
I know we, very quickly, everyone started, whenever we're going to speak to someone, we're all, stating their name or even their office location just to make sure that this message is about to be directed to you.
Okay.
Everyone was attentive, but I think it's, we were just labeling that communication prior to it happening, and it made it we didn't get lost in the triangle.
Yes, okay. This is directed at you specifically, and here's what I think.
Yeah, two people didn't really ever speak at once.
All right.
And I thought that Mike did a very good job of coordinating the logistics
Yeah.
part. So he'll say, what do you
Yes.
think? Or what does, yeah.
Yes, Mike was brilliant, and we'll have a whole section about Mike. Let's talk visually. Let's talk about what we saw, maybe in terms of lighting, and how that helped or hurt the communication.
Mike's lighting was poor.
Mike's lighting was poor. I actually was thinking,
I thought so too.
I was thinking I might run up there with my cell phone and shine it in your eyes, and everyone would be like, "Oh, you have eyes."
I actually moved once too, and it was still fine spot.
Yeah. So maybe if you had a cell phone, you could have shined it on you. That would have been an option. If you had a desk lamp, maybe there was a shade that you could have opened, something like that. You needed that key light. You didn't have the key light. Essentially, you had fill light and backlight, no key light. So we couldn't see Mike's eyes, but again, we're going to talk about how he overcame that with some brilliance. What else did we see visually? How about Vishali and Nick? How was the visual picture
Well,
there?
we made conscious decision to sit at certain place based on the lighting in the room. So we don't know how it worked.
I could see you very well.
Yeah, they were perfect. All right, and it warms my heart to hear you say that.
Yeah, we did.
You listened to the instruction and you made a conscious decision to sit, and we could see you clearly, and I think that helped.
Yeah,
We also, we also tried to use some shifting camera angles as well.
right.
Just so, because rather than just us squeezing into the frame, it was better if I put it on Vishali or something.
I saw that, and I looked it up. I'm like, wait, why is Vishali? Oh, okay. So I took note of that, broke up that monotony and isolation.
Right.
And I think what happened with the sound
Yeah.
on your end, all right, so technical difficulties happened, whatever. But what I noticed that was interesting is we couldn't hear you all the first time. And then Nick got closer and spoke louder and just added some clarity to at least what your office was saying. And then when you spoke the second time, we could hear you more clearly because I think you slowed down.
Okay.
I think you tried to talk louder. And I feel like you also did something else impressive that I made it up.
Mute their thing so she doesn't hear people.
Okay, yeah, so the other end, the other two participants muted their microphones, so perhaps you didn't hear feedback. So you looked at the camera.
Oh.
That was it. Did you make a conscious
Yes.
effort to look at the
To
camera?
look at the camera.
Did anyone else notice that? Yeah, she looked directly into the camera, talked slower, said less, and all that in combination, we could hear her and understand her. It still wasn't perfect, but it made a big difference. And that looking into the camera, actually I was trying to, I wanted to do a screenshot, just to get a screenshot for you, and I pulled out my cell phone and was looking for the screenshot, and I looked up and Vishali was like staring right at me. I'm like, oh my God, she got me looking at my cell phone. So it captured our attention. And in this case, I think it really overcame that communication barrier.
And we talked about it a little bit afterwards because he could actually hear me in his room.
Yeah.
And I was loud enough for, so for Nick,
I
but
could hear it better through the wall.
right.
Oh, yeah?
So I'm not sure. I was thinking, is it my projection, the way my voice projects? So we couldn't figure that out. Because you could hear Nick very well.
Yeah.
And we were
Yeah.
sitting right there.
It could have just been the microphone too, because sometimes certain tones of your voice were not as deep as Nick's, obviously, so sometimes they're just not as sensitive in certain parts of the spectrum.
Sure.
But this
sure.
was a good exercise to find that out, so that's great.
Yeah, how did Daniel and Jim look to Mike, to you, and Vishali and Nick?
The lighting was a little bit more dull too for their side.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed. We couldn't really see because we were in here and we were probably looking at them and the larger two screens, but I noticed Daniel's face looked a little dark and a little bit of darkness on Jim's face as well. So I wondered how that looked and how that played. You know, we could have tried to find. I was looking at the overhead, and I thought maybe I could bring that over and shine that at Jim and Daniel. One possibility. You do the best you can.
What about the posture in our frame? What about the posture? Because I know me and Jim have different postures.
We were like
Yeah.
leaning a lot, like it's
What did you find?
uncomfortable chairs.
I thought you were a little bit like leaning and not straight up. I did notice that.
So-
Yeah.
Because I was actually, my face was straight up, but I was leaning forward a little bit.
Yeah.
But Jim was sitting straight up, but leaning back.
Yeah, Jim looked a lot further away.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so now let's talk about how brilliantly Mike coordinated this meeting and how that made a difference. Tell me, what did you hear? What did you think? He needs to be promoted wherever. All right, just based on this interaction. We've heard you talk a little bit before in class, but this is probably the most we've heard you, and we've got already one person who needs to promote you. My thought was, it's just so obvious that you're the VP of this department. Like that was your role. It's just, of course, they promoted this guy, and he's the one that deserves to be in that role, just based on the way we saw him coordinate that. His business expertise, but also because of the techniques we talked about that we just went over. We were able to hear him. He used simple preview, simple review. He was able to single out, I want to hear from you, Vishali. I want to hear from you, Nick. Renee?
I thought the fact that he was the only one on his screen also helped a lot because there's only one person to look at, and you can clearly tell that he's like the leader of the group.
Okay, so that is something we can keep in mind. Yeah, definitely a point that makes a difference.
It's clear he was directing the conversation.
Yes.
And I got lost. I'm like, this looks like a real meeting. And you're like, okay, you, and how about you, and what do you think? And he checked back in with the different groups. So it was good management of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think in terms of his understanding of the business, he just read the scenario.
Introduction and conclusion were awesome. Just break the cycles. They were very nice.
Yeah, and I'm sure Mike is great at his job. I'm sure he should be promoted to VP wherever he is. But in terms of his expertise on this, all he did was read 2 pages. Like that's all he did. And now we're like, oh my God, he is the brilliant, leader of this company. Yeah.
I think in true fashion, he let the operations people and the sales people talk percentages, numbers, and figures, and he gave us that. I think he gave the audience too the 35,000 view summary, like you said. So he wasn't saying X percentage this and that like we were numbers. He was just, what's the message? Here's the takeaway. You have our support and our commitment. You got anything else you want to add? Look forward to your proposals.
Absolutely.
You guys were really forthcoming, so it kind of made it easy. I thought, like, if nobody wanted to talk, it would have been a lot more difficult.
And he's humble as well. gives credit to the rest of the team. All right, fantastic. So let's move on to the next scenario. So you all are going to, you're going to use their room? You like their room?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got our graph experts are going to go to a team room, and they're going to explain the graph, which is on the next page of your slides. They're going to make some sense of that for us. Tell us how that's interesting from a historical and statistical standpoint. So Marilyn, you want to just call me when you're ready?
Yeah, every time I think of a route, it's like.
Team of experts, about to be this laptop.
do you have our screenshot or you don't have a screenshot?
I didn't get it.
Okay.
As under pressure, it was you. You looked at me and got me scared that I shouldn't be playing with
I was
my
just
cell phone.
thinking, for the next Christmas card, I can have our screenshot. I'm kidding.
Sorry. Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
All right. We're ready when you are.
So we're gonna wait for Jose for a second. I'm giving my message to you. Yeah.
They've got it on mute while they're setting up. Interesting though. Kind of making judgments now. Everything okay? Are you all right?
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Take your time. Didn't mean to rush you. Remember Jose is the guy who's the guy who's in the bathroom.
So what role player do you?
They're gonna explain a complicated visual aid to us. And you've got it in your slides. It's this map right here.
All right, class. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Torisano. I'm here with my two colleagues, Marilyn Coleman and Jose Macia. Our presentation today is on Charles Menard's visual graphic, The Cart Figure T. So to begin, I will provide a background on who Charles Menard was and on what his visual graphic is portraying. Next, Marilyn will walk the class through the visual graphic itself and we'll go over its various components in more detail. Lastly, Jose will explain to us all why it is such an impactful and powerful visual and why it is often considered as one of the greatest visuals ever put together. In fact, it is so impactful that it is often referred to as the visual that brought a nation to tears. So that is our agenda for today. And to begin with the background portion, I'll start that off now. So to begin, Charles Bernard, he was a French civil engineer. He was born in 1781. He quickly rose to importance and popularity for solving complex civil engineering problems in his time. However, he is most famous for his significant contribution to the information graphics. He was able to put numerical and statistical data onto geographic maps in a way that provided data-rich content to its viewers, and which was frankly never seen before his time. So he was a pioneer in that front. His most famous visual graphic is the one that we will be discussing today. It's called The Cart Through Your Teeth. And the English translation to the title is The Figurative Map of the Successive Losses in the Men of the French Army in the Russian Campaign of 1812 and 1813. So this visual graphic displays the loss of the French army when they were invading Russia. When they were invading Russia. Okay, and as we'll see, the graph expresses the loss of life and hardships and everything that the French army endured at the time. So before I pass it on to Marilyn, which will take us all through the visual graphic in more detail, I will provide a quick background as to what the Russian campaign was. So the Russian campaign started in June of 1812. And it started along the Polish and Russian border. It was led by Napoleon, and it was an army of about 425,000 men. Napoleon decided to invade Russia in an attempt to defeat the Russian army and compel the Russian Tsar at the time, Tsar Alexander, to comply to his demands of seizing all trade with the British merchants at the time. As we'll see shortly, the campaign was a complete disaster. Instead of engaging with battle against Napoleon's army, the Russian troops retreated back and they burned everything along the way, crippling the army and devastating Napoleon's army, which at the end pretty much was the demise of his empire. So now that everyone has a quick background and everything, I'll pass it along to Marilyn and she'll walk us through the graphic.
Okay, as you can see in the graph, we have two distinct paths. We're going to start on the left-hand side and move towards the right. That's going to represent the French army's march into Moscow. That's the lighter shaded, thicker line. Then we're going to move back with the darker black line to show the retreat from Moscow back to the Russian border. So when we start on the left, you're going to see the thickest portion of the line is when they started. One interesting thing about this graph is that everything is drawn to scale. In a way, the distance of the lines representing the march is 1 millimeter for every 10,000 troops. The distance is drawn to scale, and it represents the movement in geography. So not only do we have troop movements, we have some geography in towns being represented. We have river crossings in the thin, wavy lines. On the way back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the bottom half of the graph, which represents the temperature. So we're going to start on the left-hand side with the thickest border. That's the beginning of the movement. As they move east, some troops break off for Napoleon had strategic planning for why these troops moved, somewhat to protect the left flank or have one account says it's a side troop. So not every group moved on towards Moscow. So, you know, as the band gets thinner, some of the width changes because of troop movement, but most of it is because of the loss of troops through either disease or capture or desertion. One of the problems that they had was getting enough supplies to all of these soldiers. So as they're moving towards Moscow in the summer, the hot weather affected their ability to perform effectively. At one point, I heard they were drinking stagnant water and dying from disease that way. There were very few battles on this move to Moscow, just a lot of loss because of poor logistics mostly. When they get close to Moscow, moving east, they had a major battle where they lost 30,000 troops. And as the Russians kept retreating toward Moscow, again, as Alex said, they were just devastated by the loss of the ability to forage for food, even if their suppliers couldn't get to them. On the far right side of the map, you can see Moscow, where they ended with 100,000 troops from the 422,000 they started with. Once they got to Moscow, it was about the middle of September, about September 14th. Napoleon was expecting that the leaders of the Russian army would be there so he could try to negotiate peace. But the Russians had abandoned the city and burned everything as they left. The French troops stayed for another month in Moscow and then decided to retreat back. So what we see is the black line where they're starting to move back towards the Russian border. Now, when they're moving back, what the map represents at the bottom is the change in temperature. So now you're facing the Russian winter. The bottom of the map shows the temperature in a Reaumur temperature scale, which is not terribly off from Celsius and Fahrenheit when you get down to these low temperatures. So as you keep moving through, going back towards the west, a lot of the troop losses were due to illness again, starvation, capture, desertion, and then when the winter starts to set in, now they're suffering from the harsh winter temperature. As you get towards some of the river crossings, you see a huge dip each time you cross the river, and it's mainly because thousands of people were drowning as they're crossing the river. So when you see about halfway through, a thicker black line comes down from the north. Those are the remaining troops that had broken off on the way that rejoined the rest of the group. And as they go and keep moving towards the west, a lot of the troops again die crossing the river. So as you keep moving west, you keep seeing the drop in temperature and how that affects the troop losses until we get all the way back to the Prussian border where it started, and it ends up with 10,000 of the 422,000 troops they started with. And that's about less than 3% of the people who started the journey ended up making it.
Okay, hi everyone. I just want to mention some takeaways really quick about the graphic. What does the map show us? For some visual comparison, the upper lighter band showing the large army going to Moscow versus the narrow dark band showing the small army returning. Shows casualties, captured in variety of complexity, size of the army, location, direction, temperature, and time. Integrates text and graphic into a coherent and whole. Illustrates high quality content, complete and accurate data, presented to support the argument against war. Please comparison and adjacent to each other. Basically, the source of what Minaj tries to tell us through this graphic, we have many dimensions of data that take several individual graphs to represent. It's quite clear because of its ability to combine all the dimensions, the loss of life, time and location, temperature, geography, historical context. For example, he displayed the point where Napoleon's troops divide into subgroups, like Marilyn just mentioned. By breaking out the main bar into branches, he had thin lines to represent river crossing on the return trip that further the signaling Napoleon's diminishing troops. So clearly, if you start looking at the graph from the left to right, the small portion of the graphic and the small portion in dark, you can clearly see how it was like 468,000 people was reduced to only 10,000. So that's my main takeaway. Anyone have any questions?
Questions?
Okay, well, thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you. I guess we don't have any questions. Thank you. All right,
It was clear.
all right, just come on back. Thank you. All right, we'll do a quick debrief when they get back, and then we'll take a quick break as we're getting set up for our last 3 interviews, our last exercise, which is 3 interviews. Excited for your interview, Renee? We're excited. Can't wait. So we've got reviews, interview on, what's your topic?
It's about my new lifeline.
Awesome. Can't wait. We've got Al and Emily are going to give us some insights into politics. Peru. Fantastic. Yay! Oh, thank you. That's fantastic. All right. Great work. So, how do we want to start this off? Let's think technically. What did we see visually, audially, visually, and in terms of sound? What did we see, and how did that play into this presentation, Mike?
I thought 3 was probably a challenge for Skype because it's hard to fit on the screen.
Yeah, I moved the laptop almost to the
Yeah.
other end of the table.
Okay, yeah. I wish I had taken a screenshot for you, but you saw. But what did we see in terms of the picture of the 3 of them?
Maryland was front and center, really clear, but then the 2 gentlemen on the sides, we can only see about half your face.
Oh,
Yeah. Did you notice that on your picture?
no, I saw all of me in there.
Oh, okay.
Well, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I did.
At least in the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
When you're speaking, you entered the camera range, but when you weren't,
Okay.
Yeah. So we started just basically by seeing a little more than half your face. And the same thing. It's like Alex, we saw half your face, and Jose, we saw half your face. I think Jose, when you started speaking, we saw pretty much all of your face because you leaned in a little bit. Yeah. So how did that affect our interpretation of Alex and our understanding of his content? We could only see half his face. Dan?
It's like he's prefacing a more important thing that's going to come. Maryland's she's right there front and center. So,
Okay.
you don't really have to pay attention to what Alex is saying, because once Marilyn talks, then that's where we really.
Okay, so we got that visual cue. Now I think Alex overcame that to an extent because he had such good, well rehearsed information. So he gained some credibility that way, but started at a little bit of deficit because we were only able to see half of him. So, and what was, I think, awkward about that, we were only able to see half of him. We were able to see all of Marilyn just right in the middle of the screen. And then we were able to see, and we were able to see half of Jose. Both Marilyn and Jose, they were staring right at the screen the whole time Alex is talking. So it's almost like they weren't connected with him because they were looking at us. And I think it's the thing to do in that situation would be to do a couple things. One, just turn and look at Alex. All right? Wait patiently for him, be supportive, be interested, and also smile.
Yeah, you're racing.
You all,
I was like, hey, let's look at the camera so we don't look like we're not looking at you.
okay.
You know what I mean?
So, okay, so, and I saw that when you gave your presentation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. When you gave your presentation, you were right in the camera, and that was fantastic. But I think the people who are not speaking would be well advised often to look at the speaker, because it just looked like you're kind of like your death march into Russia, like waiting.
We're paying attention. We're
Sort of.
focused. We're looking at the camera. We're trying to not look away or look at the screen, but we didn't think to look.
Jose interacted, I think that towards the end, he was looking towards his teammates for validation, some of the facts he was recapping.
Okay.
So I think he did do some of that too at the end to kind of help bridge that connection between them, that they're also a team.
Yes, and I think that made a big difference. And so here's the thing: we're working to an extent in illusions. Now you all had some good information. I think you're a well-functioning team, but there are things that made us scratch our head and say, wait a minute, are they on the same page as a team? And that was one of them. The fact that you're all looking straight, you're not looking at each other, not really interacting, and not smiling like this is a fun, exciting thing, and that you want to portray to us. And Alex used some very good verbs where he said this is the most important, whatever. This is the graph that brought a nation to its tears. There's a lot of really interesting, meaningful stuff here.
It was just kind of, I think, it was a little bit uncomfortable trying to be all squished together.
Yeah.
And we talked kind of about this a little bit. We didn't know if it was better to kind of be squished together or move the camera or just have one person at a time come in. But at the end, I guess we just went with trying to move it together and capture all of us. But it looked like we were all like fitted.
We could see all of us.
We could see all of us, so maybe that's what kind of threw us off.
Okay, so we mentioned two options. They could have each come in one at a time, or they could have moved the camera. What do you all think in terms of?
I thought it was interesting that it looked like we were looking straight at Alex from a height perception, looking up at Marilyn.
I raised my
looking
chair
down
up.
at Jose all at the same screen. And I don't know if maybe rotating it would have prevented or made it seem more even, because I don't know that you were sitting that different.
Yeah, the added awkwardness of like we're looking at them from different angles. So not only, and it was an interesting effect, Marilyn. So you're right in the center. You are completely silent, staring straight at us. And as Mike mentioned, your chin was up, like you're going in this authoritative point of view. All the while, Alex is trying to talk where he only gets half the screen. So it's something that made a difference to your audience for sure. But let's get back to which option they should have used. Lavanya?
I know, I think towards the end, I thought that Jose came very close to the camera, so I could see his face like very much.
Okay, did that work for you? It didn't? It would like scared you? Okay, okay.
So much in the front.
Okay,
I
all
don't
right.
know if it's just me.
Okay, well we got some feedback that he interacted a little bit more with the team, which is helpful, but also got some feedback that in the process he may have come close and scared at least one person.
I thought he was assaulting the camera just a little bit.
Oh, two? Okay.
But like,
Two
I
people
can
felt
also
assaulted.
tell that he's reading right off the screen because he'll come really close and he'll squint.
Were you doing that? Were you reading off the screen?
No, I have like I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to focus between the camera and the screen. So I was trying to f And my son, because,
Okay. Oh, okay, so you were so he was attempting to look directly at the camera, is what he
yeah,
said?
that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah. My note on that is you were not looking directly into the camera. And I think Alex and Marilyn were looking directly into the camera. And I noticed a difference. So the two of you were engaging me more just by looking at the camera. And then when you started talking and you weren't looking at the camera, you lost some of my attention. But thank you for trying. It's good to practice that. Where are we? I still want to know the best option for it.
I
Michelle.
think they should have zoomed or switched camera, like moved the laptop, like Nick and I did, and I think that would have helped. If they would have rotated, there would have been a lot of distractions coming in and out. And if they just started with 3 of them and then focused more on Alex first and then moved the camera, I think that would have helped.
Yeah, they maybe could have started with the wide shot and then focused on all of them.
Yeah, I think they could have added some distance between the camera and where they're sitting as well.
Okay.
Because in real life, I've been in conferences where there are actually 20 people in the room, and the camera's actually 20, almost 20 feet away, and you pretty much see everybody talking and interacting, and it's more natural that way.
Okay, and I understand you did the best you could. You put it as far away as possible, but if that's a possibility, that's an option. Yeah.
I think that rotating would have been the best option, specifically if the camera's too small for the group. And one of the reasons is because they weren't really interacting. After they said their piece, they would fade away from the camera. So I think like Alex came out really strong, had great material, piqued everyone's interest with what we're going to be discussing.
Mm-hmm.
And then after he stopped talking, he looked down for most of the rest of the presentation. So it's like, I think by rotating, they could have took those breaks, those moments after they got their information out, and it's just a continuous frame, for the audience as far as.
Right.
You didn't know if that would be a distraction with us switching in.
Or
Just so,
rotate
we're
it.
going to hand it off to
Okay.
Marilyn, who's going to discuss the topic.
Yeah, I've got 2 votes for rotating the camera. And Alex, we never would have known that you felt bad about making a mistake if you hadn't told us. When you lost your spot?
No, we had some technical difficulties, and then I was just like, I don't know what's going on right now.
So what happened? You couldn't see what happened? You couldn't
Well,
see
the
yourself?
screen was like, I can see all you guys, so I was like talking to the audience. I was like looking at the camera and looking at you guys, and then all of a sudden it just went away, and then
Like in
Minimize.
it just was at the
Okay.
corner, like a little bit of it, and I was like, and I started seeing something else. So I was like, what's going on
Okay,
here?
and what did it look like to us?
Like you forgot.
It looked like you forgot you looked like you forgot your place.
Well, yeah, I was thrown off. I was like, where was I? Like, I literally did forget my place because I just, it was like my audience was gone, and I was just like, what happened? And then I was like, all right, where was I? What was I saying? And then after a while, I'm like, okay, let me pretend like they're there again.
Okay.
In that situation, do you voice out, I apologize, we're having just a slight difficulty, so it kind of talks the audience through it, so they know what's happening?
Sure. He could have asked. It looks like I lost the picture of the audience. Can everyone still see me? And we would have said, yes, we can still see you. At which point, I guess he would just keep talking until that situation resolves itself. There's a famous story about a former President Ronald Reagan. When he was early on in his career, he was a newscaster, and the sound went out or something the sound didn't go out. What happened is he forgot what he was supposed to say. He forgot what he was supposed to say during this newscast. And what he did is he just started moving his lips as if the sound went out. So he's talking, and I'm talking, and I'm looking confidently. And then when he remembered what he was supposed to say, he just started talking again. And so all our view is just what we see on the screen. And what we saw is we saw Alex getting flustered, and so we thought, all right, it must be some dysfunction with the team. But to your point, Nick, I think you could have just asked, say, all right, what's going on here? Can everyone still see me? Okay, I'll just keep right on going.
Okay.
And even if the 2 points didn't make sense, even if you linked something ahead of something else, we forgive you for that, or we don't notice that, or we think we're just watching a video conference and so we might have missed something. We tend to think it's our fault rather than your fault. Okay, fantastic. So next we've got interviews. All right, so let's take 10 minutes, except for maybe Renew. I'm going to steal like the first 5 minutes of your break to get set up for the interview. And let's come back at 8:35, and we'll finish these up.
Yeah, well, I was
Okay, so you felt a little awkward switching back and forth
Yeah,
in her.
yes, I feel.
And my comment was it worked very well, and I think whoever brought it up too said it worked very well. Renee?
I was actually, like thinking along his lines. I was actually like pretty distracted because I turned to her and I was like, I feel like it's probably just better if he's looking at her because like that doesn't exist for the viewer of the video, right? So like I'm just watching, so why is this person looking at that person and then looking at me? That person and then looking, I don't know, I personally, like if I was watching this as a YouTube video, I would just want the speaker to focus all attention to the interviewer because that's the person asking the question, even though the camera's just kind of like chilling there.
Okay, and that is the way I introduced this, and that is the way I framed it. That an interview typically is the viewer is brought into an intimate conversation between two people, and you get a sense of what it would be like to be the interviewer and have that conversation. But we're still only seeing one part of it. But so there is some feedback that it didn't work as effectively as I thought it worked, but I liked it, and a couple other people liked it, and I thought the reason why it worked is because when you turn to the camera, it was relevant to the viewer. He wasn't giving us facts and figures. I could start to discern, oh, he's telling us his personal story, and that's a valuable takeaway. And that's why I thought it worked. But definitely, Renu, I think that's a great point that we want to keep in mind is the default place to look is at the interviewer. The only other thing I want to say is something interesting that happened with the way the questions were asked. And of course, you didn't hear my suggestions or my lecture when you planned these questions, so it's completely understandable that this happened. But I don't know if you remember, when he was asked the first question, he just gave a very short answer and then stopped. And it was just obvious he was just waiting, I'm not going to say anything interesting until you ask the next question.
So I thought he was waiting for a proper introduction. Like I think probably the first question should have been, I'm here today with so and he's going to tell us about, and then because I think he actually introduced himself. Like it's almost like he almost ignored the first question because it jumped right in too soon. So he sat back with, well, I just want to thank you first and appreciate the time that you're taking in. So it seemed like the introduction, I think, kind of switched the momentum in everybody.
So the story is, if I keep answering the question, I'm gonna answer the second one is the here. So I just wait for her to ask the second one. So I can move on. So if I keep answering the question, and when she asks the second question, that's already answered.
Yeah.
We didn't practice before, so
Right.
So that's the reason.
I could tell exactly what happened. I'm not saying that was something you could have avoided because you didn't have this information, you didn't have the time to practice. But we want it to look like just a natural conversation, and you're not planning to say something based on her next conversation. It's how do we make this seemingly awkward thing look like a real, sincere conversation where we are brought into this intimate moment. And we just need to think about a few of these things in advance in terms of using the techniques. All right, great. Let's move on. Are you two ready? All right. Check. how that interview went. Oh my God. See this? I was having problems with the feedback. But yeah. Mr. Kumar.
Raymond's smile really carried her attitude. She showed energy, excitement, passion for her recording line.
Yeah, smiling made all the difference. So, a note on when you watch this, it's possible